Hey, how's it going? Have you been watching porn? I hope not. I hope not. That is some nasty stuff. Anyway, yeah, don't watch porn. It's a good opening. Let's talk about trust and obedience when it comes to God, because that is kind of the number one person who you are supposed to trust and obey. And if you're a Christian, then you probably already recognize that, even if you don't think about it that much. Hopefully you do. But, let's get right to business here. Trust and obedience go hand in hand here. You can't really have one without the other when it comes to God, alright? You obey God, obviously, because you trust Him. But if you say you trust God, then that means that you're going to obey Him too. You can't have that trust without actual obedience. How do you show trust? It's through action. You can't do a trust fall without actually throwing yourself back, okay? So if you say you trust God, if you really do say you trust God, then you have to obey Him. And what does that mean? Well, that means fighting against sin. That means not accepting sin. That means not trying to mix Jesus with a little bit of, whatever else that is actually contradictory to His teachings or that isn't consistent with the Christian lifestyle. It means a lot of things, really. There's a lot in the Bible, and I can't go over all of it right now, but if you trust God, you're going to obey Him and you're going to serve Him unconditionally, or at least you will be working towards the point where you're able to do that. And you won't just accept as being in a state where you are not obedient to God and where you reject His commands or you don't submit to His will. If you trust God, then you're not going to be willfully doing any of that. Because when you trust Him, really, trust is a simple word. That means that you trust Him and you don't act as though His word is untrue, or as though there's maybe something else that will be better for you than what He wants for you. You don't mix it up with something else or put your own terms and conditions on His commands, alright? You just obey, and you obey completely, without wavering, without any conditions, without hesitation. That is what perfect trust will look like. So, be honest with yourself. Do you trust God perfectly? Because if you're not in obedience to Him, then really, you don't. Now, what if you want to trust God more? Well, like I said, these two things go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. If you want to trust God more, then just start obeying. Start taking those actions that normally would be indicative of your trust for Him. You see, trust is as much of a choice as it is a feeling or a state of mind or a condition of your relationship with somebody. A lot of times, trusting requires a choice that isn't completely comfortable. That isn't actually going to go this way. Bad traffic on the highway, I'm sure of it. Trust is... I lost my point, but trust is not a condition of a relationship. It's not just a feeling or anything like that. It's an action. It's a way of behaving towards a certain person, or a way of treating a certain idea or something like that, if you trust an idea. People who do trust falls, okay? Actually, let me back up just a little bit here. A lot of people, and I've actually heard this, they don't really equate trust with obedience as much as they should. And they see the two as more distinct than they really are. And so they think that, well, obedience, if you don't actually trust somebody, isn't as significant, or it's not as meaningful as obedience in perfect trust. Well, here's the thing. Okay, let's say you take a trust fall. Let's go back to the trust fall. A lot of people are really anxious about trust falls. It's really difficult for them. It's not easy for them to just throw themselves back. But they do anyway, and they take kind of that leap of faith. And faith is really similar to trust. They take that leap of faith, they take that trust fall in trust. And not because they're comfortable about it, but because they trust that things are going to be okay. And that trust is a decision more than a feeling. As far as their feelings, yeah, their nerves are going crazy. They don't know what's going to happen. But they trust that whatever does happen, they trust that person enough to go into that without knowing how exactly the story ends. And that's the same way it's got to be with God. You got to be able to trust Him and obey Him without knowing exactly how the story ends. When somebody does a trust fall that they're not comfortable with, it doesn't become an obedience fall. You don't call it an obedience fall, no, because there's still that trust involved. And so when you're choosing to obey God, even when you don't feel like it, even when you feel really uncertain, when you feel really anxious, when you're really worried about what's going to happen in the future, that doesn't mean it's not trust, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't go ahead and go through with the obedience because you don't feel like it's really from the heart. God calls us to action, and a lot of times actions are uncomfortable. We do things that we really don't want to do because we know they're right, because we know that God has commanded us to do them, because we know it will be beneficial to somebody else, just out of love. And I don't mean love because, I feel so good about this person and I just want, I want to do whatever it takes to make them happy, and that's just going to make me happier. But a lot of times we act in a love that has nothing to do with how we feel about it. We act out of love when it might be painful for us, when it might even be harmful for ourselves. That's selfless love, which is still love. Just because you don't necessarily feel on top of the world while you're doing it doesn't mean that it's not real love. In fact, I would say the selfless giving love is more meaningful than just I feel good about it, so I'm going to do it. When Jesus went to the cross, He did not feel very good about it. He even prayed specifically for it not to happen. He did not want to do that at all. That's not even, he knew it was going to hurt. He clearly did not want to do it, and yet He chose to do it anyway, out of love for us. And so in return, in our relationship with God, as far as our obedience to God goes, we need to choose to obey Him and trust Him in that obedience, through that obedience, regardless of how we happen to feel in the moment, regardless of whether we wonder if something's going to happen, or if this is really the best thing for us in this life, or whether we're, just genuinely terrified that it's going to be really painful and that it might be too much for us to bear. Even then, you step out and you just trust God through your actions, through your words, through the thoughts that you choose to accept or reject. All of that. It's all a part of that. And that is a part of trust, and that's a part of obedience. And they are very nearly one and the same. Say, a song by one of my favorite groups, Project 86, and it's called Above the Desert Sea, and it's about the story of Abraham and Isaac, when Abraham was, God was testing his faith, and He told Abraham to go on top of a mountain and sacrifice his son. And as you probably know, if you know the story, I hope you know the story if I'm talking about this, because otherwise it sounds horrible, but Abraham obeys, and he goes to the top of the mountain, and he's about to do it, and then God sends an angel, and he calls out to him. He's like, "Yo, Abraham, okay, I see you're serious. All right, don't do it. Don't actually do it. We're just, seeing how far you really will go for the Lord." But even so, the line that repeats in the song is, "To trust is to obey. To trust is to obey. To trust is to obey." And it's absolutely true. If you trust, then you're going to obey. Abraham trusted. He did not feel good about it at all. Right? And God had told him that he was going to have all his descendants and everything. Yet he had only this one son. And this son that he was being asked to give up seemed like his only hope of having God's promises to him fulfilled. Even in this case, it would have seemed like God was maybe even contradicting himself, maybe even acting in a way that would not be in line with his own promises, and yet Abraham trusted anyway. That's that, just extreme, incomparable form of trust that just obeys even when everything else seems to be, screaming out against it. His emotions, his instincts, just everything is bent against this obedience, and yet he does it anyway because he trusts. And out of that trust, he chooses to obey. It cycles back into itself. You trust because you obey, and you obey because you trust. It's all, like I said, just about one and the same. So if you're trusting God, then you need to obey Him. And if you don't trust God enough, then, hey, you need to obey Him even more. And start taking those actions that show trust and that build that trust. Because a trust fall, go back to the trust fall, a trust fall doesn't just display trust, it also builds trust. Trust has to be built through testing. It's just like muscle. There's so many things that are a lot like muscles. I feel like muscles are a really good lesson for us as far as building certain character traits, trust, discipline, all these things. You build them by pushing them to their limits. It's the same with trust. You have to push trust further than you feel like you're ready to go. And that's what builds it. That's what makes it stronger. And it's exactly that way with your trust with God. You've got to take those leaps of faith and obey even when you don't feel like it. When everything else is screaming, no, disobey, find another way, do something else. But if you're serious about God, and you're serious about being a follower of God, if you're serious about being a Christian, then that trust and that obedience, there's no way around it. So, do it. Get started. Just obey. Alright? And that is about all I can say right now. If you watch porn, it's a good place to start. Stop watching porn. Stop caring about... I talk about porn so much, and I'm bound to always go back to that whenever I talk about anything. I know a lot of people probably don't want to hear about that. It's like, oh, gross, porn. I don't even watch porn. Yeah, I'll leave that for my other videos. I'll just say, hey, if you watch porn, don't watch porn. But my other videos, that'll be plenty for that. For now, yeah, that's all I can say. Trust God and obey Him. They're the same. And if you're a follower of God, you will do both. And if you're not doing both right now, then hey, it's not too late, okay? If you're watching this video, if you're still breathing, it is not too late. And God is all about those people who are turning and making a change to follow Him. He doesn't care as much about how you've lived the rest of your life up to this point. What He cares about is what you're going to do now, what you're going to do for the rest of your life. So if you've got a change you need to make, then go ahead and make that change and get serious. All right? Have a wonderful day. God bless you guys. If you like this video, if you like my voice, if you like my extremely loud, obnoxious car, if you like any of that, if you want to hear me talk and rant about pornography and how to quit that, I've got like 20 videos about that or something, then check out my channel. And there is so much of that there, and there will be more of it in the future. I'm still doing these. If you want to keep up with that, then subscribing will be a good way to help you keep up with that. But that is about it. Have a wonderful day. God bless you guys, and I will talk to you later.